There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our virtual brown bag of December the 10th. As we are recording these meetings so that people can benefit from these recordings later, or we can always go back to it and review. What was that link that the guys have shared, or that book or whatever it is. So just be aware of that, depending on what you're going to be sharing. Just uh, make sure you're not sharing something that would get you any kind of trouble. Uh, the virtual brown bag, we get together here every week. We do some sharing of tips and tricks, experiences of things that we did the hard way, and hopefully we can make somebody else's life, easier. Frustrations, difficulties, whatever it is, some things that you may have run into that could be beneficial to others. We do this again every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. Feel free to pass along the information for, to coworkers or friends who might be able to benefit from our discussions here. The topics are pretty much open-ended. Usually they go around some form of software development, but we don't talk just about, the geeky aspects of like programming languages and things. We take a step back. We talk about user stories. We talk about Agile, Scrum, and things like that. Whatever it is that people are going through that moment in time, we just bring it up and talk about it. We have the virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting here, as well as links to the videos from previous meetings with a little blurb of what the things that the main things that we talked about in those meetings. And this morning, thanks George, he suggested we add a calendar, recurring calendar, a thing at the top there on the page, so you can go there now, click and add it to your calendar. Have a reminder, that way you don't forget that this is what we do every Thursday. Cool, that's it. I do have a couple of things that I can just quickly bring up since I'm sharing the screen, if you guys don't mind. What have I been up to since we last talked? So says that the calendar link did not work. Oh, maybe I didn't push. I will do that when we are done with the meeting. Because yeah, I think, but I didn't push it to the website. Thanks, Alper, for bringing it up. So since we last talked, I had mentioned that I tried Xamarin one more time. Did it and on to wrap up November summary for the virtual brown bag and the links to the meeting. I been thinking a lot about work-life balance and how that makes me cringe when people mention about it. In summary, to me, there's no work-life balance. There's just life and how you decide to live it. So I've posted my thoughts on it. Might be interested. I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to improve my reading habits. So I put out a post on how I'm building my book library, both the digital books, audiobooks, paperback books, and things like that. I talked about the importance of technical communities. That's something that I've been involved with for 25 years or something like that. And this is what we are doing here. This is a technical community, and how important I think it is, and what kind of role it has played in my own personal career. I actually put that as the main like pivotal point in my personal career. That's the one thing that has made the biggest difference. It's not like, oh, what technology have you chosen? What framework have you chosen? No, it was the choice of getting involved with technical communities. That's when I actually started really developing as a professional and as a person as well. Talked about reading autobiographies, which is a habit that I didn't have much before. And this year I actually kicked it up a notch. Talked about, the fact that all front ends will be dying, usually sooner than we would like. So I have my thoughts out on that as well. Thoughts on speed reading. What was that, man?
You want to talk about some of these, or like you want to
I'm
like?
like yeah, I'm just going like through the list of things, and then folks can say, "Oh, can we talk about that?" And
Yeah,
then, by all means, right?
you're right.
Uh, Talked a little bit about speed reading, because it's something that came up in conversations, and I felt like more people could benefit from that as well. And last but not least, yesterday I gave my first talk ever in Spanish. That was fun. Right, so I just blogged about it. What is the experience like? Because there's this misconception that every Brazilian speaks Spanish. It's not the case. Does it make it easier for me to speak Spanish? No, it's quite the opposite. But then, so there are some of my thoughts are out there, and I haven't blogged about that, but I started messing with a Flutter, which I mentioned last week that I was gonna start looking into it. So I spent a whole 2 hours working on it. I like what I've seen so far, but what to share, it's totally up to you guys. What you guys want to talk about? If you want to talk about any of these things, or if you have other things you'd like to bring up, this is what we are here for.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's something on the chat window there. Sing while you read. Yeah, that's cool. So Alper is mentioning about a tip on singing while you read as a speed reading technique. That's something that I've learned like I think it was about 20 years ago maybe, where in school, at least in Brazil, at the time that I was in school there, the way that they would read you to teach is like one letter, one syllable, one word at a time, that painful experience, which makes you or forces you to say the words in your head, in your mind as you're reading, which is extremely slow and completely unnecessary. The brain, as soon as you see the word, it recognizes that. You don't have to say it in your mind. And a way to exercise that I've learned all those years ago is to put up a song that you know the lyrics by heart, sing the song along as you are reading something. That will force you, I mean, you're not going to be able to say the words you're reading in your mind, but you're seeing the words. You are reading the article. So do that for the whole song. At the end of the song, write down what you remember from the article with your words. You don't have to remember word by word, but like, okay, this article is about X, Y, and Z, and see how far you go with that. That's a great exercise to, just get used to speed reading. Cool. And then Alper asks, how do you like working with Dart? So again, I've spent 2 hours on it. So as uh, as far as these 2 hours have taken me, within an hour, I was able to get a simple Hello World app running both in an emulator and on my iPhone, which was already way better than my previous week's experience with Xamarin. So that was like, okay, exciting. Now I can keep on going with this. I do like the fact that Dart is, I mean, it looks very similar to any C-like language, C#, TypeScript, JavaScript, and all. That's kind of cool. I like what I've seen so far. The thing that I do not like, I think I've mentioned that last week, is using a language like that, I'm actually sharing that here, right? So for those who are not familiar with Flutter, this is the page for it. And actually down here where they have an example, something that I really don't like is using a C-like language to describe views. I really do not like that, because then like here you're describing, okay, on this view we have a child that's a transition and then all the properties and stuff. But then at the bottom of the file you have that arrowhead, anti-pattern that it has always bugged me. In a way, it reminds me of maybe like writing React, just using plain JavaScript instead of using JSX, right? Where you can use more of a markup to describe the UIs. But that's it may be just me. It's just I do like using this kind of language to build or to describe views, right? But that's what I've seen so far. I don't know if there's any like alternative to build Flutter apps. No more than my 2-hour experience with Flutter. No.
Sorry, it's breaking up for me. What you're saying?
Guys.
Is it breaking up for anyone else? Maybe it's just me.
No, me too.
Yeah, me too.
All right, guys. Yeah.
What's that?
We're all having trouble hearing you. What you're saying?
Oh,
Yeah, you're breaking up your internet.
bummer.
Yeah. Sounds like you're saying that you're not a fan of structuring using JSON to structure UIs.
Using C-like type of languages, right? It looks weird to me. It does not, like, I get to the bottom of a file and I see all of these, parentheses, colon, semicolons, and commas, and it just feels unnatural to me. It makes it harder, at least to me.
Oh boy, we are gonna be having one of those days.
To find.
So I have
Oh,
a
it seems
question
like
for
my.
you.
Yes, sir.
What's up?
So does this end up generating CSS, the code that you're showing on the screen right now? That,
So
Sorry, John, you broke up. Say that again.
does this generate CSS, that code on the screen?
I don't think it would if
I
you're
do not.
native, it wouldn't. But
Yeah, because exactly. So it's if you deploy to native, it's gonna generate whatever iOS or Android needs to
Okay.
represent that. Right.
yeah, I
That's
do
why I
think.
think it's like. Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, so I do think that there's a web generator for Flutter. I'm not sure how robust it is,
Okay.
though. Yeah, but
Yeah.
so
You
in
know, it
that
just.
case, it would have to generate, you know, CSS unless it did some weird SVG thing or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. The few examples that I've been through, it just seems like there's a lot of like boilerplate type of code, or like too much code that I need to write to do some simple things. But again, it may be just the nature of the samples that I've seen so far. So I'll keep digging.
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
How much of the UI layout code is cross-platform? That's a great question. I think it's very similar to, say, Xamarin Forms, right? Where you can do a lot of class platform things for maybe 80% of the features, but then there's always those 20% where if you need to interact with anything that's device specific, like the camera, the GPS, the accelerometer, then there's no way to be cross-platform on those, right? That's what I've seen so far. Haven't experienced yet.
Um, cool. Anyone or Flutter or anyone? Does anyone work? Ionic.
Alper says, I'm out. Ionic would probably be my first choice. All right. Yeah, maybe, Alper, you should share some Ionic with us. I haven't had any experience whatsoever with Ionic, so if you ever feel like sharing anything, that would be cool.
But Albert, Ionic does not compile directly to native, right? It is basically running a web view if you're loading it up on native.
Right. It's the next generation phone gap. Yep.
Your audio is really quiet. I can't really hear.
Yeah, it's running WebView. It's the next generation of Cordova phone gap thing. Yeah, but it's all web components though, so it's all HTML and it'll just work on anything. You write it once, it will just work. I mean, we'll just do a little bit of platform customization, like putting the menus at the bottom for Android, on top for iOS, but theoretically the code that you write should just work on anything from Electron to browser to mobile devices and stuff.
It's interesting. So, like, I was talking to some former coworkers a couple weeks ago about React Native, and like the one of them was like a hardcore mobile developer and game developer, and like into performance, was kind of going on about how all of these tech are completely crap, and like he would not recommend it for anything. And why would people recommend it to begin with? And I mean, it basically occurred to me that, you know, if you want a application that follows web paradigms and looks like a web application, then by all means make it a web application. PWA has a ton of capabilities, and it's very unlikely you're hitting a use case where you don't hit those capabilities, at least that couldn't be solved other ways. But the one situation, the one big thing that I realized was the entire reason to go React Native or Flutter or Ionic or whatever is that you want your app in the App Store. And that's really it for most situations, right? Like you don't care about any of the other stuff that like being native brings you. You want, what you want is a web app. You just want an entry in the App Store. And it's just like, you know, if you really start to think about it, how much just corrupt and technology and stuff like that could be simplified if Apple and Google would just start allowing PWAs into the App Store. And I mean, just, you know, go ahead and, you know, set some minimal quality standards. Go ahead and, you know, denote them in a different way in the App Store, have filters on them. But if you just get it into the App Store, I swear, like, the vast majority of these use cases that people use these tech for just disappears. So there's just an insight recently. It's very frustrating because we could be living in a simple.
At 30% profit margins, I don't think they're maybe not margins, but 30%, you know, fees. Yeah. I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon. And
charge for it still.
What's that?
They still charge for it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's tougher for them without control over the source code, but yeah, they could still try to interrogate the JavaScript or something like that.
Yeah, I'll see over that. Come on. Yeah.
Another interesting question, if you're analyzing it that way, is do you even really want it in an app store, or are what you're looking for a square icon home screen of your tablet or cell phone? Because in that case, you can just go straight PWA and try and get people to tap the, you know, install button basically on your website. If they're not trying to discover.
Specifically what you want is in the App Store, because nobody's used to installing applications by going through the web browser and tapping the install the home screen button.
Yeah. It's changing.
You just need that exact functionality just in the App Store, so that the actual way of delivering it to people, of getting it in front of their eyes, is not this completely different process.
Yep.
And we have these cathedrals of tech just based around this one limitation, which is completely artificial. So that's really, really frustrating when you think about it, and really underlies the, like, a large part of the split of like native versus, you know, all these compiled to native frameworks. You thought what was fixed recently, Ryan?
I think Albert mentioned that in iOS can do push notifications with PWA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I don't think any of that was intentional. Those are bugs. Yeah. Yeah.
And George, you were asking about Riot.
Like, so the way that, the way that it's supposed to work, Albert, is, and again, it doesn't mean it's not buggy and doesn't work. I mean, it's not like Apple loves making stuff match web standards. But the way it's supposed to work is that your app is supposed to have a service worker that runs in the background that wakes up every once in a while whenever service workers wake up. And it gets a small window to run some code and can do notifications then. So that's the intent. That's how it works in other scenarios when you visit NewYorkTimes.com and ask you, like, can we push notifications to you? That's what it would be doing. All right, cool.
Yeah, I thought those would work only when you're like in the browser or something, or when the actual PWA is actually running. Like,
The magic of service workers. That's, but yeah, I mean, like, it is technically running. It's just running in this kind of process that's controlled by the operating system when it launches, and it can launch in the background. I have one small thing I can bring up. I don't know if anyone else has like a big thing they're dying to talk about. All right, then I'll jump on this small thing.
All
So this, oh, where's my share? This landed on my. Saw this recently. So Sindrehus, who's I definitely recognize this handle. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I don't remember what I recognize him from, but I mean he's got full-time open sorcerer in his handle, so I'm sure I run across him for whatever reason. Anyway, it might have been some of his gift generation stuff. Anyway, he posted this recently. So this is actually not a GIF. This is a actual image. And if you look at how it works, it's kind of interesting. So what happens is inside of the README, you have simply an image link to an SVG file that's right there in the code, right adjacent to it. Nothing unusual there. And then the thing that you can do when you have that is you could go in here and you could use the SVG for an object tag to just start writing HTML inside of it. So it's an SVG, and inside of it, it just has a foreign object. And then here you go. Here's HTML, including all sorts of CSS. Great. So that's pretty cool. Kind of useful idea. Kind of got me thinking in a security direction. I'm not about to drop a 0 day on everyone during an open call, but like because it didn't work, although it can work in some situations where you wouldn't expect. If you can do that, there's nothing technically stopping you from putting JavaScript in that same HTML. And if you could put JavaScript in there, what you can do is have the JavaScript when you load the page, drop a big popover over the page that looks exactly like the GitHub login page and says, "Oh, your account has been logged out. Please log in again to continue." And then people put in their info and you send it off to, their passwords off to wherever. So I decided to try it and see what would happen. So I cloned the repo, I ran it, and I opened it up. And here I just to start with, I added one small line. A little script tag, right? Just to see what's going to happen. So I refresh it on my page, the SVG, and I get that. And I was like, oh shit, did I just find a 0 day? Because if I can do that, then I would be able to do this on GitHub, right? And try to trigger this on GitHub. So I pushed this up to GitHub to see how it would work. And I refresh it, and I don't get an error. I don't get that message. And if I look over what transferred, in fact, I can go in here and look in there directly. I do see that is in there. So what happened? Why does it work locally and not work when I push it to GitHub? Anyone want to take a guess? Exact same thing works. Yes, I was loading it locally through file colon, but it works the same exact whether it's a HTTP or not. It's not cores. There is nothing going on with cross origin. And you can see what they actually did was like really clever. So the content security policy it comes across with is default SRC none, style SRC, blah, blah, and sandbox. And I actually had to go like and Google this to figure it out what exactly it means. But you start looking at it, so it's default, so it reads left to right. So this right here, default SRC none, sets kind of the stage for, and everything else builds on top of it, left to right. So default SRC means it will not, none, setting it to none means it won't run any script tags, I believe. But then, or I'm sorry, it won't run any source code at all. Script or styling, or whatever other options are. I think there's something you can do with fonts. And then style SRC to enable custom CSS if it's in line. And then they said sandbox, which is I still don't fully understand what sandbox is. I believe it's if the sandbox directive is present, the page is treated as though it was loaded inside of iframe with the sandbox attribute. So it does things like for enforcing origin. I do still have some questions about this. I do seem to remember a long time ago seeing that you can do surprising things with just CSS. So you could, for example, maybe get logging for when someone visits your page or views your icon. So actually, we could try this right now, right? We'll interact with it. So does request bin still exist?
No idea.
Yeah, like I remember it existed. And it was super useful at one point, and then I think it went away for a bit. Create request bin. What? It goes to pipe dream? No. What? That is not what I want. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Hook bin. What's this? Create new endpoint. So if I could do this, so then the idea here is if I direct any request to this, I should be able to see it, right? So if I do that, okay, great. So there was data. So what if I then go into this and I can add styling, and I could, for example, do something like dot container hover background image, was it URL, background image URL. I always forget that syntax. URL and then just, okay. URL and paste that in there. So if I do that, and then, I mean, I guess let me run this locally. This is my local one. So if I do that, crossover, well, the course shouldn't block the incoming, it should just, yes! Okay, so look, it's sending a request out here. Let's see if that'll still work if I push it to GitHub. I assume it will. So if I do push it to there. Trying to exfiltrate info with CSS. Okay, so now if I go to the URL on GitHub, and I can actually maybe, let's back out of this. All right, so if I go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm hovered over it. Do I get requests from that? Interesting. So, okay, maybe I didn't get it here. So that's interesting. I would expect if you have that ability to do hovers. So here's what I'm thinking. If you have the ability to capture data on a hover, which actually this might also be shut down by the CSP. But yeah, if you could capture data on hover, you could, for example, track how a user interacts with your stuff. And in fact, I do think you could do certain things to exfiltrate data as well. But maybe that's not actually going to work. Let's see. What if I go directly to it, view it raw? Yeah, I get refuse to load the image because it violates content security policy. There you go. So this kind of gives you an insight into like both the really powerful security tool that a well-written content security policy is, and the really surprising stuff you can do with a site once you start allowing any user content on there as well. Because I've seen stuff where people can basically are taking this and you could do stuff where you track how a user interacts with the thing. I believe there's a way you could track what they're typing even with that. I don't remember exactly how that works. But lots of interesting stuff there. Anyway, so that's kind of the small thing I wanted to talk about. I'm very close to hack GitHub, but not quite because they're pretty smart. But I bet there's a bunch of other services out there that don't have the absolutely correct content security policies on set.
Yikes.
I know. You'd steal passwords on all of them. Cool. Yeah, actually, let me just Google this really quick. It was there's this article. It was key stealing with CSS. Key logging. CSS keylogger. There it is. Ah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you see that this is what they do. So they take an input like the password, and they run some CSS on there, and say, all right, when the value ends in an A, then you're going to do a request to something that ends in an A. When it ends in a B, you do a request to something that ends in a B, ends in a C, you do a request to something that ends in a C. And just as they're typing, it's sending out character by character all these requests to your server about what exactly they're typing. Fun little stuff.
So could you, does the inline policy prevent the loading of external CSS files?
It can, but that's not what's happening here. It's giving you much better control because the CSS is still there. Here, I'll refresh this.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was just embedded. It was literally there in the.
Yeah. So notice none of this is going to happen until I hover. And when I hover, it tries to do that request. And that's when the content security policy module shuts it down.
Right, but if you shipped the GIF with that effective,
Yeah, it's not a GIF. So if you put it in a place which doesn't have a really well thought through security CSP, yes, you can. Because like, look, they're even saying here, like, you know, it's because you have default SRC none, so that's the default for all source. If image, so if it didn't say exactly that, or image source, then it would totally allow this to go through. Yeah. Super cool, interesting stuff. Again, probably I feel like most websites haven't put that much effort into getting the exactly right CSP going. Because this is impressive that they figure out it's a short, succinct rule that allows them to do stuff like put some CSS on there, but not actually do anything particularly malicious. You could actually, all right, here's what you could still do. But it's a markdown document, so you could probably do that anyway. I wonder if I could use, okay, I have one more idea for something to try that could be interesting. So where's my file? It's right here. This is my local one. Oh, right. Well, so I wonder if you could use the CSS to break out of the SVG frame and out of the markdown frame and make the CSS be full screen and say a message. But I don't think that's possible with SVG. I don't think you can break out of the SVG. So, something to research. Could play with. All right. Anyone else have stuff they want to talk about?
Oh, if nothing comes up, we can actually do that live debugging of why doesn't the recurring calendar meeting work for everybody. I was just checking it out here. George, I wonder if it worked for you because either you were logged into your Google thing. Yeah, I'm not sharing anything yet. Because I tried the link incognito window, it fails for me too. Even though the meeting is set as public. So I wonder if you need to be logged in into any sort of Gmail account before you can actually access.
Well, yeah, because what would the link do? The link has to send it to the Google app, to the Google Calendar app, which means you have to be logged in. What you could do is I think they have an ICS you could export too. So like what I would do maybe is put both the ICS, a link to the ICS right next to the link to the Google. And I think, don't they give you a link to the ICS directly?
Nope. When we do publish event, and I'm not sharing because it's on my other computer here, but it only gives me the link pretty much like what I gave you on Slack.
Yeah.
They either give you that or like HTML code that you can paste, which is really just an H tag.
But you should be able to go to the event itself and either get an ICS link for it or download it as an ICS.
That's where I am. I can't find that option.
Yeah. And then you could just put that on the site for anyone who's not using Google Calendar.
Right.
You get both side by side because everything is terrible and we don't feel like developing any standards.
Exactly.
Or, I guess following standards, both of those are standards.
Yeah, I do not see that option here on the calendar invite. It gives me options to print, delete, duplicate, publish, and then publish only gives me those links to the meeting. That's odd. May need to do some research on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
No biggie. What else?
Yeah, we can talk about some of the other stuff you mentioned at the beginning that you had wrote about.
Sure.
You want to tell us why you think all front-end technology is going to die?
I don't think I know for a fact.
Okay.
I mean, and you know, technology is very stable on backend related things, but front ends, I mean, coming from like MS-DOS apps through Windows 3.1, you know, Fox Pro, Visual Fox Pro, Basic, Visual Basic, Visual Basic.NET, WinForms, WPF, Silverlight, you know, HTML, and then you get Angular, Knockout, AngularJS, React, Vue. I mean, how many have I mentioned just in like 10 seconds? So we know 5 years from now, Knockout is probably going to be completely dead. React will be on its way out, or it's going to be like smelling in favor of something else. So every single front-end technology, it's doomed to die way quicker than, say, back-end technologies. Right? They evolve as well, but it's not as volatile as front-end stuff. That's my main point there, because devices change, because users' expectation change. Like one of the points that I make there is 20 years ago, 25 years ago, users would gladly use any kind of software we put in front of them because they just found out, wow, there is this software that automates, you know, what I'm doing here. That's great. Whatever the software is, whatever it does, however it looks, I'll use it. Over the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, users have gotten used to having their own personal computers, having their smartphones with like intuitive, you know, applications that they use, and now they and then as the devices evolve, as the user expectations evolve, well, front-end technologies have to follow along. And that's why they change so fast. At least that's my reading of the situation.
What about, so what, so you're saying you're thinking that it's been, but like something like WPF, it's been around for 15 years. It's not going anywhere right now, right? Maybe Xamarin Forms takes over. So
Windows Forms has been around longer than that.
Right. But Windows Forms we at least grumble about, like pretty much universally, right?
Speak for yourself.
I mean, sure, no, but okay, like, but I think that's either way. That's the point is what makes that stuff so different that it's still sticking around, and none of that is changing.
Why is it sticking around?
Yeah. So, like, for me, I would answer is because you have, compared to JavaScript, an almost insignificantly sized community of developers, and it is controlled almost entirely, like what ships is all controlled almost entirely by Microsoft. Like it's open, other people can write. There are other UI frameworks on .NET.
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely certain that if I search Qt.net, that you'll come up with something. But like, you know, well, the reason why would seem to be that nobody bothers to make anything better, right, or different, or whatever.
So, I have some assertions that I'll make about all this. One of them is that not all front-end technologies go away. HTML and CSS, you know, 20 years plus for both of them.
Yep.
Almost 30 now.
What either means has changed significantly, but sure, yeah.
So my assertion is that the problem with front end is that people choose frameworks over libraries. So frameworks are things you plug your code into. Libraries are things you plug into your code. And I read Claudio's blog post, and my thought was the reason that's always, you know, doing those upgrades from one framework to another or one platform to another is because frameworks end up taking control of how you write your code. You serve the framework rather than the framework serving you. Think about some libraries that you could use that you could still actually use pretty effectively today. There's some JavaScript libraries, you know, you may not think of them as necessarily UI frameworks, but there's lots of JavaScript libraries that you could use and will be fine, you know, 20 years from now. So I think that's a big problem with UI, and I understand why frameworks are attractive in UI because it's kind of easier to get started in a way. It gives you some structure, and most developers coming into the UI world don't understand the structure of what they're doing.
Well, I mean, I would say it's more than that. Like who wants to say, okay, I'm sitting down at the UI of my project. I have to figure out the threading model for my user interface. Like, who wants to be writing that code? Like, a library can't do that. A framework has to do that, right?
I'm not sure I get your point because I don't see any UI frameworks that worry about threading, especially in the web world. I mean, there's not really.
Well, okay, so like again in WPF you have like okay everything's being marshaled over to the main thread.
Right. Yeah.
Stuff like that. In the web world, it's a little different in kind of sort of, except for in the future it won't be with service workers, but like you still do have. Yeah, I think in the web world it's a little simpler, though you still have like big decisions that you have to make about like, well, how do you hook into the application as a whole, and if you are treating it as libraries versus frameworks, then you're going to pick multiple things, and how do you get them all to play together? And that's kind of where it comes up in the web world.
Yeah. And I'm following what Ryan's typing in the chat, and also to clarify my post there, I didn't mean to say that like those technologies become obsolete technologically speaking. I mean, they're still perfectly fine. I mean, if you ask me to create a certain project based on the constraints, I would say, man, I would die to do it in WPF. I think that would be perfect. However, I get myself thinking, okay, what is the last time when somebody in a meeting said, oh, we should use WPF for that? And what kind of reaction you get from people, right? So there's this perception thing. So there's a lot of technologies like that nowadays is like, oh, 5 years ago it used to be the bomb. Nowadays you don't even bring that up because the technologists are going to be like, that's so 80s, dude, even though it's from 5 years ago. No, that's for old people, right? So yeah.
Yeah, Ryan's saying there's some interesting old. We need to do an entire day or month about interesting old ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading Turing's Cathedral right now, and there's really neat stuff in there that you kind of want to talk about, like Sam Porchar again. I will say, like, just because I know we've got some more junior people on the call too. Like, I don't think anyone's saying is that time spent learning React or Vue or anything that is not going to be used. Like, I don't think the idea of virtual DOM is going away, though. Like the specific way that it applies, whether it's actually virtual or some hybrid of that, might change, right? And if so long as you have that idea, you're still going to have this kind of unidirectional data flow sort of thing going on that you have with React. And that's a mouthful to say. So like none of that will go away, but sure, maybe some of the details will. Although with React, you kind of have like a pretty, like the community is so large that you would be ditching an awful lot of stuff to move on from it entirely. Like a lot of stuff would have to be rewritten. Yeah, and so there might be a critical mass there where like the only way that React is going to evolve into something else is if it's backwards compatible with React. I'm not going to rule out that possibility at all.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just so big. Like you'd have to say like, okay, well there's 1.5 million React.js packages. Probably nobody cares about all of them, which is maybe the case, but I don't know. That's a lot of packages.
Right.
Yeah. So Ryan's saying, oh yeah, so white papers, yeah.
Yeah.
It's there are definitely like really interesting ideas. Like I never fully understood why it was like so only a single thread have access to the UI. Like that seems bizarre. I mean, I get that it makes it easier for the computer to synchronize stuff and decide when to flush to, you know, when to actually do the rendering and flush it to the graphics card and stuff like that. But surely we could have a better approach than that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, heck, just give me control over when I can flush it to the graphics card. Just not via a really, really weird API.
So the problem with that is you and everybody else. I mean, you can get that. Just do DirectX and write what's effectively a video game, and you get total control over all that stuff on Windows anyway.
Yeah.
It, I mean, the reason that WPF and WinForms and everything else on Windows controls which thread writes to the UI is that if you do it wrong, you host the entire operating system. And that's, oh yeah. Yeah, I've done it, so I know for sure that it's true. I mean,
Well, yeah, why?
they will shut your process down instead of let you bring down the whole UI. But you can, in fact, until Windows figures it out, just jam everything up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like what's the actual limitation of having like because again, yeah, my supposition was like, well, if I have multiple threads that can write, like there's basically some buffer, two-dimensional name buffer, right? That's like here's the color at this pixel or something similar. Or maybe it's like shape or something.
yeah, but I mean, if you're playing in the regular Windows world, you're dealing with a message pump that everybody basically shares because we have to,
Right.
right? And if you're a bad citizen on the message pump, you're going to make bad things happen for the rest of the apps running.
Oh, because other apps. Okay, so all the rendering stuff is going through some globalized piece of art.
I mean, it's way better since we moved off to the old Windows 3 code base onto the NT code base. I mean, it's a lot better. Back then, it was horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, you want to jump in and talk about?
Yeah.
I was trying earlier. I was y'all were heated, so I tried. I just started typing instead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
I think what you're saying about the multi-threading is actually interesting. Like, just consider if you had like a pixel space controlled by an actor, and you could actually communicate across pixels, or I mean, it's in a similar way to like spreadsheets with their cells.
Yeah.
You could do like game of life programmed against the pixels with actors backing each pixel or something. It'd be kind of fun to see something like that.
Pixel area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, pixel area too, but I guess it kind of depends on how you wanted to do it. You probably could have an actor per pixel. It'd be crazy expensive, memory-wise, but yeah.
But I don't know. Throw Erlang at it; it'll be fine.
Memory's cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it would be nice to see somebody actually try that. Like, no one's doing interesting things like that. They're just like, oh, we have this. It's like everybody wants to keep at the framework level of inspiration, and therefore nothing really changes. People just rewrite what's already been done in slightly different ways, as opposed to diving deeper and really trying something new, which is a lot harder and takes more time. And
yeah. Yeah, we all have stuff we need to get done. Yeah. That's the unfortunate truth. I don't know. Yeah, we should do a thing about like interesting old ideas, because there definitely are some.
I remember some groups doing like papers we love,
Yeah.
or something like that, where they read old papers. And there have been a few of those that I've watched, and I've always been just shocked at like the things people have done in the past that have either been forgotten or abandoned, or there's like pieces that were easily integrated into things that other people had built, and so they used them. But otherwise, like, there's just a lot of great ideas out there that people just don't use because it's someone else hasn't done the work for them.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, like the first user interfaces in general, the first like graphical UIs weren't mice, and they weren't like some UI that you tabbed around with the keyboard. It actually was you would point at things on the screen with a light pen. Like that was the first ones, and we don't do stuff like that very often at all. Like that, but that used to be the normal way of interacting with like those computers where like really the terminal was just like a little circle that was this big or something with like a half a crystal ball.
That would be an interesting UI.
Yeah, when Douglas Adams his mouse first, like I think it supported multiple people at the same time mousing around.
By the way, I think you're onto something with this crystal ball. I think you need to create a spherical monitor.
Yeah.
It's touch sensitive that allows you to manipulate things in three-dimensional space visually.
Yeah, that's the way we Minority Report.
Very cool.
I have to jump off. I will throw out one more thing here. I've been reading Turing's Cathedral. They talk largely about John von Neumann and I never exactly understood why. Like obviously von Neumann is just like one of the most brilliant people of ever, right? Like pretty much everyone, including the other most brilliant people of ever, say that. But I never really quite understood why he got so much credit for computing, because like, yeah, there's like the von Neumann architecture that all computers use, but when you look at it, you're like, this is so obvious, it seems weird to like give it to him. But kind of reading that book like really makes it clear, like he, I mean, just on an organizational level, he was the one that either discovered like all the mathematicians that were working on this early stuff, or went to Europe and like got them out of Europe before World War II and put them to work on this project. He like handled all the politics, all the organizational stuff, all the funding, found them a home, literally had to find some of them homes. And it's really impressive that on top of being like one of the best mathematicians of all time, and like weirdly one of the best engineers of all time, even though he never really did engineering and contributing to all this stuff, he also was just handling politics on such an impressive level, and like just organizing people. It's just really cool to understand. And yeah, he totally does get credit. Also, he was like the first one, according to this book, along with his wife, that conceptualized separating the hard, like having a generalized programming language that's separate from the hardware. Whereas a lot of other, before that, there was not really a clear distinction at all between the program you're writing and the functions it's calling and the hardware itself. So it was their way of getting like more with less with Maniac. Anyway, I got to jump, but I just wanted to get that out there because it was an interesting change of reference point for me.
Nice. Well, that was a good one, guys.
Yep.
Cool.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Nice to
Nice
see you again. Sorry, I've been missing in action for a while.
George was just asking about you. Very cool. All right, y'all. Take care. Thanks for joining in.